Super Supportive by Sleyca. Chapter 42. Be Safe. The news that the system was down hit the Artonans hard. The man in particular kept asking Alden questions, like he thought maybe Alden had misunderstood the first half dozen. Alden plumbed the depths of his vocabulary to find new ways to express the system's complete absence. "It's not here," he said insistently. "Goodbye contract. No contract on the moon. I can't see words in my eyes." His toddler talk would have been funny if the situation wasn't so dire. Fen-Ar finally said something snippy to the guy when he wouldn't leave Alden alone, and he made a surprisingly alien-sounding cry of rage. The only time Alden had ever heard an Artonan make such a noise was when Joe had introduced himself to Sophie in something approximating actual Gurivekri. The man stomped off into one of the offices and slammed the door behind him. A moment later, the crash and clatter of things smashing into the walls could be heard. Fen-Ar sighed and walked over to look at the map. Alden followed her like a duckling. He had so many questions, he hated to bother her. But he couldn't stand the lack of information. He sorted through his numerous urgent queries, trying to pick ones he could ask that would have simple enough answers. Well, the map page was up. He'd start with questions involving location. Where are we? Fen-Ar gave him a nod and zoomed into the map with a circular motion of her fingers. Alden watched closely. Probably it was pointless to memorize Artonan touchscreen gestures, but he would try to collect every scrap of information he could. "Electa is here," she said, pointing at a dot on the center of the map, right where Alden had expected her to. It was in the middle of the glowing red circle of evil, as he'd feared. He really wished he knew the words for chaos or demon. It would make all the things he'd guessed up until now easier to confirm. Instead, he asked, "Where is Worley Roden's house?" He was hoping to get a sense of the problem of scale. "Here," Fen-Ar said, tapping on another dot in the direction Alden decided to think of as east. It was about a third the distance from the center to the edge of the red zone. "This is the Nithkalkak." That last word must have been laboratory. "Is the laboratory safe?" He did his best to get the new term right. Fen-Ar answered at length, then paused when she saw the blank expression on his face. "More safe," she said slowly, "but it isn't safe." "Can we go there?" More words Alden didn't understand. Her tone sounded like a shrug, for whatever that was worth. "We are not safe here and we are not safe there," he suggested. "Both same bad?" Yes, that was right. He could tell from her expression. "Where is safe?" "Nowhere," she said. "Where?" Alden insisted. He at least wanted something, just for his own sanity. She zoomed the map out again by making the opposite circular motion and stared at it for a while. She went through the forecast screens that showed the problem growing for too many days. Finally, she pointed at a mark far, far to the west. "Here," she said. "It's safe for you, give be a kin ithinid, maybe." It was too far to walk, and those missing words were pretty important. "For me?" "Not now," she said. "When then it will be safe for Avowed. If kiv be endek." Alden fully understood the urge to go hide in an office and break things. "Please," he said, "how do we be safe? Again? Please don't give up on me. Please keep repeating it until I get it. I know it must be annoying, but it's important, and I'm trying, I swear." To his surprise and utter gratitude, she kept trying. Slowly, he pieced together an answer and an understanding of what was happening. "Is it better to write the words?" she asked at one point. Alden shook his head. The written language was harder than the spoken. "Talking is better." She went on. He watched avidly as she swiped through the screen, using pictures when words wouldn't do. They moved out of the way of demon bugs a couple of times. Alden was almost willing to try his luck at soaking the damage from one of them with his preserved putty ball when it floated near the television. He wasn't sure if it was worth the risk. It would be bad if he just collapsed into a placid heap from overusing his skill, like he had that time he tried to carry the shrieky bowl. But he really wanted the screen to keep working, because what Thanar was trying to get across to him would have been hard for him to understand, even if she'd been explaining it in English. The red zone would grow for many days. The number was so uncertain that Thanar would not give it to him, but at some point, beyond the scope of the forecast, it would begin to shrink again. Big then small? Thanar nodded. It would start getting smaller when the ships came. Thanar conveyed this with a lot of pictures of spaceships. Ships from the other side of the moon? Alden asked. The half that was supposedly less chaos-stricken would send aid, wouldn't they? But she shook her head. From the mother. All the way from Artona 1? Yes, they were in the same solar system, or so he'd been told. But why wait for help from another planet? Joe had said spaceships were in short supply out here, but surely... Oh, maybe I'm not thinking about it right. The red place is too bad for the other side of the moon to help here, he guessed. She nodded. Wizards come to help? A pause, as if she had to think about it for a while, then another nod. Maybe Alden didn't have the story exactly right, but he was in the right ballpark. Their reaction to the news that the system had vanished was so dramatic compared to their reaction when he'd first told them it was malfunctioning. A buggy system must have been within the realm of their expectations, but a missing one was far, far outside it. And no system meant no teleporting, for almost everyone, as far as he understood it. The Artonans could do it. It seemed to be something of a rarity. Even Joe had said that non-system transport was hard to come by, so maybe it was only the truly elite who were capable of it. And if regular people didn't even use the system teleportation on Moon Thagon, then it must be a hard place to get to. So, the people who were qualified to fix a problem of this magnitude were probably big, badass wizards who did not live on a backwater like Moon Thagon, and if they couldn't teleport in, they'd have to come by ship. The red place is big, then the wizards come to help, then the red place is more small, then here is safe. He was sort of right, judging by her expression, but not really. She kept explaining. She'd been snappy and all business nearly every time Alden had seen her. Always the leader, totally on top of things. But she was so patient with him now he wanted to hug her for it. For many days the Chaos Zone would grow, because there was nobody on Moon Thagon capable of stopping it. Eventually the ships would come, and it would start to shrink. Thanar thought the ships would arrive at the location to the west she had pointed out on the map. Then, after many, many days, the red zone would finally go away. There would be no true safety until then. This was hard for Alden to comprehend, not literally, but in every other way. He kept asking broken questions, and she never once refused to answer. More and more of these? Alden asked, gesturing at the demon bugs in the break room. One of the fast ones had just punched through a wall. Frankly, Alden was surprised he, Thanar, and the television were all still unharmed. Are they just going to keep coming until the entire world is made of them? At this point, Alden rather expected the answer to be yes, but slowly the scientist got across a different idea. There would be more and more of the demon bugs, until there were 2 or 3 times as many as there were now, and then eventually there wouldn't be many at all. They go? Alden asked hopefully. Before the ships come? Yes, they would go. Only that wasn't the end of the problem. Thanar showed Alden a spatter mark where one had hit the wall, and she mimed inhaling dramatically. Because he'd had the fear himself, Alden understood what she was getting at, but it still horrified him so much he didn't know what to ask next. The demons were going to eventually all disperse or alter from bumping into things, and then everyone would be walking through an atmosphere full of whatever they were made of, getting it on their skin and breathing it in. Alden imagined his lungs turning into something that looked like the injured woman's leg, and almost puked at the thought. What an unfathomably gruesome way to go. Well, now there was only one question left to ask, and he couldn't hold it back anymore, even though he wanted to. We're dead before the ships come? He had moved for a while, so his preservation had faded. He was gripping the stupid putty ball so tight he'd crushed it, and he couldn't feel the tiny piece of Stuart's bone in the center. Yes, Thanar said, her voice cracking a little. We will die. Me also? Alden was right on the edge of sobbing. His self-control was shot. Maybe not. Maybe an avowed can live, she added. Then after a moment's hesitation, she added, and Kiv-E. That sounded like a name. Kibi? Thanar nodded. The girl you gave the kick to. The word wasn't Riebit, so it must have been the whistle, or toys, the older girl. The big girl is Kibi? It wasn't quite the right pronunciation. It was probably better pronounced B or Kibi or something, but he'd take what shortcuts he could at the moment. In the laboratory, maybe. Alden and Kibi can live. It's only a small thithik. If the ships come with many John, and they are fast, but I think it's possible. She touched his shoulder, softly, with one of her injured hands. It had to hurt. Maybe she just didn't care anymore. I'm sorry, she said. We sent Kath, you and Kibby to the laboratory in the Alakthik, father. But we didn't understand the problem Alakthik until we saw this, and you told us about the contract. Was she apologizing for not sending him to the lab with the girls and their father? Or maybe for not sending him instead of the father? The only thing Alden could imagine that would make the situation even harder than it was now would be if he was placed in charge of two small children he couldn't speak to, without a single adult around to explain what was happening. Will you go there? Thanar asked. Alden was surprised. To the lab? Why was she asking? He was almost positive she'd just told him his only chance of survival was there. Yes, he said. If the lab is more safe, I'll go there. Let's talk more, she said, flicking through the screen. Before they... is gone. Shouldn't we check on the others? Alden realized it had been a long time since he'd heard crashing sounds from the office the man had disappeared into, and the woman in coveralls hadn't spoken up in a while. He turned around, and the sight that greeted him made him shout and stumble back into the wall. Thanar followed his gaze. She looked sad, but not surprised. It's better to die fast, she said, staring at the body of the woman, her friend. Alden didn't know if she had failed to dodge one of the demons and it had killed her, or if she died from the original wound, and the others had struck her body. Parts of her flesh were strangely morphed. Person, plant, rot, emptiness. The guy, Alden said, dropping into English again accidentally. We have to check on him. What if he's... We should talk more, Thanar said. You have to go soon. Alden's heart was loud in his ears. If the other scientist was still alive, wouldn't he have come to the sound of me shouting? He tried to focus on everything Thanar was telling him, but it was harder than it had been. This is happening. This is really, really happening. To me. And nobody is coming to save me for a long time, and I can't do much at all to save myself. He just kept dodging the tiny demons. His skin crawled. He wondered if it was his imagination or if it was the chaos residue growing thicker in the atmosphere. Eventually, the television took a hit, and his lessons with Thanar ended. She'd been teaching him about day and night. Night would come, but not for a long time. A month or so. He was lucky. So lucky. With the television gone, Thanar took him outside to show him the ground. They walked along the road for a while until they came to a place where the dirt looked strangely sandy. She prodded it with one of the white sprinkler sticks Electa farm used for irrigation, and Alden watched as the ground caved in around a small depression. There will be more of this, she said, pointing at it. She was still taking great pains to speak slowly, so that he could get it all. Lots of this will be everywhere soon. Yes, Alden said robotically. He'd been stuck on yes or no for a while now. One for when he understood, one for when he didn't. Everything was so awful that he'd actually run out of questions, and he just started inputting the things Thanar seemed to think he would need. The Artonan woman coughed, and a fine mist of blood spattered the dirt. You should go to the lab now, she said, wiping her mouth on the back of her hand. She gave him a smile. Be safe. Oh, it's funny, he realized, looking at her face. She's being funny because I keep using the word safe for everything. I should smile back. He managed it okay, he hoped. Thank you for coming, Avad Alden, she said. Instead of standing up from her crouch, she sat down on the road. Get up, he thought. Please get up. Don't leave me all alone here. We thought nobody would come for months, but you came now. Many more of my friends would be dead. I'm sorry Thelnet and back so soon. We thought we had more time. You're welcome, Alden croaked. Telro Mohammed. She shook her head. He always shihathak. Alden couldn't decipher the words of the message for Joe, but it seemed unkind to tell her that. I will tell him. You should go now, she said again. Be safe.